All right. I've got the green light from the producers. We are ready to get started with today's episode. And we definitely want to welcome all of you to the Evolve Sales Leader Live. And excited to have you with us today. Jumping right in, any good sales process has multiple steps, but there's one step that above all really sets the table for good things to happen or not. And that step is discovery. Discovery done right allows you to find out everything you need to know to close the sale. Well, according to today's guest, most tech company founders get this step completely wrong, hindering their sales team's success and setting themselves up for costly and needless problems in the near future. And today's guest is Racheal May. Racheal is an expert business development and sales professional and an internationally known trainer. She's the general manager of training, certification, and licensing at a sales growth company, a highly regarded consulting firm that specializes in turnarounds, sales growth, coaching, sales process development, and more. In today's conversation, we're going to be diving a lot deeper with Racheal into the discovery stage, find out how most tech company founders are getting this wrong, why that matters, and just how to fix it. Racheal, fantastic to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. You make me sound so fancy.
Well, we believe you have something pretty remarkable to say, and we're excited to have you and share your insights with our audience today. Before we jump into that, just a little bit by way of background, if you would, tell us, give us a bit of your background in selling, some of your bigger accomplishments, and maybe describe in greater detail what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I've pretty much sat in every single seat within a sales organization, from individual contributor, frontline manager, director level, VP level. But most of my career has been spent in enablement and in training and coaching. And several years ago, I just stumbled. I love reading all the sales books. I'm a big sales process methodology nerd that way. And then all of a sudden I read, gap selling, and it just blew my mind. And I was at the time a director for Konica Minolta, and I was developing their sales curriculum for all of their sales team. I had about 300 sales reps that I was coaching and developing at that time. And I started to apply the principles, and it was life altering. But I quickly discovered it was really hard to master yourself. And so I decided that I was going to go to the master himself. And so I went back into that individual contributor role and to really master gap selling, which is largely rooted in discovery. And so I spend most of my time now consulting with tech companies all over the world, generally in the early stages to maybe Series D or Series C would be the sweet spot. And so I'm excited to talk about how this plays out and how you can prevent some of the challenges that I see our clients having.
Yeah, great. Well, you make a pretty bold claim that most tech company founders are getting this step completely wrong. And if you would describe what are they doing that's so wrong, and maybe tell us why you think that that's happening.
Yeah, so I guess it is a bold statement, but it's a true statement. It's a hill I'm willing to die on because I see it every single day. What happens is, when you're a founder, you're out and you're hitting the pavement every day and you're selling your idea. You're selling yourself. You're selling your product and what it's going to do in whatever space that you are selling into. And you're trying to raise dollars, right? And you're trying to get people to jump on your ship and want to be a part of your mission. And what happens is, generally, that means there's a lot of pitching. It's pretty much all pitching. And you build these pretty decks and you get really attached to your slides. Sometimes I have to pry them out of my founders cold dead hands kind of situation. They love their decks. And so they're pitching everywhere. And then they bring on kind of their first couple of salespeople. And what do those salespeople do? They duplicate what that founder is doing. And it's worked for the founder to sell what they're selling, which is their idea and their product to fundraise, right? But that's not the salesperson's job. The salesperson is selling the product to the customer. And those are two very different sales cycles and sales processes. And so they start to duplicate this pitching, this deck thing, and it sets up the first salespeople, the first head of sales, up for failure. And it creates a foundation of product-centric selling that lingers for years and duplicates itself like gremlins after midnight. And then years later, you run out of early adopters. Sometimes in the beginning, right? So early adopters, people who just get it, and you could just show them your thing and they're like, man, I've been waiting for this my whole life, right? And you think we're doing really well. This sales process is working really well because these people are buying it. The people who already know they have a problem and are already just like, please, somebody fix this for me. But you run out of those people quite quickly. And real sales is getting the people who don't know they have a problem and don't understand how it's impacting them, don't understand why they need to change, don't think they need to change, already have something in place. That's where the real sales come in. So when that moment hits, boom, the whole thing comes to a grinding halt. Now we have a whole sales organization that's built on product pitching, and they don't know how to do discovery. And then you have to hire people like us to come in and fix it for you and change all of those habits.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it takes a special kind of person to found a company. And usually this is an individual with a lot of force of personality. They're very smart. They're very passionate about what they're doing. And that can carry you a long way in business. A lot of folks will just catch your passion and want to jump in and give you a shot based on that. Obviously, there has to be a business case for it. But that does a lot of the pull. And I can definitely see, I've seen it as well in my own career, where the founder's process isn't really a process. It's more their personality that's making it happen, right? And then they're wondering why there's not the same connecting of dots for their sales team. I think you make an awful lot of sense with that. Now, a couple of things I want to unpack in what you've just said. Now, a great deck can be a great help to selling, right? It can tell the story very effectively. What's the deal there? Like you mentioned founders being a little overly attached. Tell us more about that, and what other issues are there with that form of presentation?
Sales isn't presentations. Sales is conversations. And so the idea that using a deck is selling and walking them through this story, well, whose story is that?
Yeah,
it's
your story. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's your story.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the customer's story.
No.
And the reality of the situation is the customer doesn't give a shit. They don't care.
Right. Yeah.
Right? They don't care. They care about them. They care about their problems. So if you have to use a deck to sell, you don't know how to sell. And I know that's a very bold statement, but it's just the reality, because it's a crutch, because you don't know how to have a real business conversation with that prospect. And like I said, the founders, they have the business acumen generally to go off of the script, to go off of the deck,
right? To
not use the deck as their crutch. But the salespeople do not have that same business acumen. And so they just end up pitching and telling a story about the company. And that's not selling.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And the target audience for those early pitch decks is probably also not the same. Would you agree?
Exactly.
Yeah. Why do you think founders get this wrong? As we already agreed, I mean, it's just some smart men and women. What are they missing here?
Well, first of all, it's not just founders who get this wrong, okay? It's the majority of sales leaders and salespeople that get this wrong. And so it's kind of like, you know how when we make cold calls and you know that the first thing that you should never be saying is something along the lines of, hey, Jonathan, how are you today?
Right.
Like, you know that sucks. Yeah. But every single time you have received a phone call in your life, it has probably started off with, Hi, Jonathan. How are you today? And so it's like this instinct that we're like mimicking bad selling when we become sellers, because it's just all that we've ever seen. And so this is really part of that, right? Like there's been this idea for decades that pitching and closing and presenting is selling. But selling is, and this is where like fundamentally why people get it wrong. Selling is diagnosing, not presenting. So selling is you, Jonathan, come to me and you have a problem. And my job as a seller is to find out, does that problem, let's say we're talking about like tech founders here. So typically you're selling what? You're selling a tool. So you come to me, Jonathan, you have a broken tool or you don't have a tool. And because of that, you can't do a thing or you can't do a thing effectively, right? And so we get like really hung up on, okay, well, they have this problem and I can fix this problem, this thing. But selling is helping you, Jonathan, if I'm your salesperson, to understand, is that broken tool or lack of a tool causing a business problem for you that is so impactful, so big, that it warrants the full cost of you making a change. And that's not just money, right?
Right.
That's time and effort and your personal brand and money. And, you know, it might just, sometimes making the change will slow down your business in order to speed it up later, right? Is it worth risk? The full cost. And so selling is me diagnosing everything that's going on in your current state and really understanding how this technical process, broken tool problem is causing a business impact problem that warrants you needing to make a change, and diagnosing that for you and then telling you, okay, here is the full story of your current state. Here's what's going to happen if you don't change. Here's what's going to happen if you do change. And here are the things you need to consider when deciding what kind of change you're going to make, whether it ever involves doing business with me or not. So it's influencing this decision to change and then influencing the decision to change to you, if that's the right decision for them. That's what selling is.
I love that, because you're talking about really sitting on their side of the table and truly consultatively selling. That word's, I think, lost some of its meaning. Every salesperson calls themselves a consultant now. But the original concept there is that you really are putting their best interest front and center, and what you're really doing in your conversation is whiteboarding out some better scenarios for them that actually solve some felt problems, maybe even explicate some problems they're not fully aware that they have, or at least not as deeply as they exist. So I love what you're talking about there. So what are some of the key ways that you can do that? Like what is what's the tactical piece to get there? Because that it's great to talk about in concept, but you know, I can see an awful lot of people who have good personality, they're committed to selling, and they can read a script, but that sounds like maybe a bigger thing than they're ready to take on. How can a sales professional really grapple with this? How can a leader help her team do that?
Yeah, well, if it's too big of a thing for you to take on, then you should probably choose another profession, because this is the job.
I love it. Good answer.
This is it, right? So foundationally, here's where it begins. And I think as sales leaders and as founders, and especially at the early stage, if you can get this right, this is huge. So it starts with the business acumen piece. So it starts with understanding and kind of walking through, okay, broken tool, broken process. I sell to, well, let's just go you, right? Let's just go with your organization. So who's your ICP typically?
I
know you have a lot of them, depending on, yeah.
Well, I mean, we can serve a lot of companies, but probably one we have our most focus on is going to be venture funded, business to business companies that, just like you're talking about, they have either a solution in terms of services, maybe it's a software as a service, something like this. Like you said, it's a thing that fixes a thing, right?
Right.
That is going to be our main target, and they're elbowing their way into a very crowded space to try to get their message heard and create very fast results for their investors. That's our target. That's our ICP.
What is the broken tool or process or tool that they don't have or process that they don't have that you provide for them?
Well, for us, we're talent solutions. That's what we do is Overpass. But our clients, it can run the gamut. This could be versions of CRM software, business management software. It could be different kinds of business services. It runs the whole gamut. It really does.
So let's say let's say the Overpass.
Okay.
So
we're on the spot here.
Yep. What is the broken tool? What is the broken process that you fix for those folks?
Well, there's a gap between how quickly they need to effectively build a team of effective professionals, I should say, in terms of time and cost, and where they need to go. They've got some KPIs that they need to hit. They need to hit it within a certain time frame, and to gather those people is extremely expensive. Now, you'd think in this space we're talking, 8-figure, 9-figure annual revenues are the targets, but they have to do it on as thin a margin as they can. They really have to make it happen on old school, Wall Street. Basically make it happen with nothing, right? So if it's a low-cost solution that can get you high-quality members on your team quickly, there's a real value proposition there, and that's what Overpass does offer. By the way, today's session was not a preachy session about Overpass, but Racheal, you put me on the spot to tell your story, so I do appreciate that.
I am, because I think it's really, like, when teaching, it's really important to, take things out of conceptual, right? So, Okay, so the problem that you're solving, if I'm understanding for these folks, is they need talent, they need people that they can't afford.
Well, that they don't. It's going to put undue pressure on them to do it. Yeah, I mean, you're talking multiple tens of thousands of dollars, and generally speaking, anywhere from 45 days or even longer to really get some decent people in, depending on how your process is structured, and that's considered probably fast. We could do it in 4 to 5 days, and at a very small fraction of that cost, and remain an ongoing partner as a talent solution for our users. So it's a pretty fantastic value proposition. But like so many other SaaS companies, people don't know us. They don't know who we are just yet.
Right, absolutely. So so I'm one of these tech founders, and I need a marketing person, and I need a head of sales or someone to do sales for me, and I don't know where to find them. I don't have the resources to recruit them. I don't necessarily even have as much money as I need to get the kind of talent that I need to hit what my revenue target by November that I need in order to successfully raise my execute on my next fundraise. Right. And I want to earn, and I want that fundraise. I want to hit $10 million, but I need to show that X, Y, and Z has happened in order to raise that $10 million. Yeah. And if I don't raise that $10 million, what's going to happen? Well, I could go out of business. I could run out of money. I could not be able to develop my product in the way I need to in order to meet whatever that next goal is, right? Okay. So as a leader, what you have to do is take your people from I help people get the people that they need within the budget that they can afford, faster, better, whatever, and get them to I make sure that you are going to hit your fundraising goal next March so that you can XYZ, or so that you don't go out of business. And you've got to teach your people what the business problem is, and take them out of that technical process problem that you solve and help them to have the business acumen to have this conversation and not this conversation. Because people do not buy to fix the broken tool. They buy to hit their next fundraising goal.
Yeah, love it. I love it.
And most salespeople can't have that conversation. And so what we do is we really create a foundation around this, where if you're a salesperson or if you're a sales leader, if you're a founder, we call this a problem identification chart. And so we just start mapping out what's the technical problem. If that technical problem exists, what's the impact of that? And if that impact exists, what's the business problem that this is all creating? And then everything, all of your messaging, all of your questioning within discovery lives on that foundation. But if you don't have that foundation built out for your people, or you don't know it yourself, then that's where everybody's going to default to the easier thing, which is staying in the technical problem that you fix, not getting to the business problem.
I love that. I'm going to ask you a few more technical or tactical questions for how the sales professional can really activate that process that you just described. But I want to give a friendly reminder to our audience, and we have folks coming from the Philippines. We have folks in South Africa. We got folks here in North America. So it's a pretty cool group we got today. I think they're mesmerized listening to you, Racheal May, because I don't see questions yet. So guys, hit me with your questions. Send them in here in the comments, and we're going to get your real-time answers from our expert of the day, Racheal May. So Racheal, as our folks are beginning to think about what they would like to go deeper on, ask their questions of you, I want to ask mine, which is, so I love what you're saying. It makes all the sense in the world, and it makes me want to get the Overpass team in the hot seat with you. What are some of the tactical things that our men and women can do to get into a better discovery conversation? Because really what you're talking about, you've really, I think, laid the groundwork for why I need to do a better job of discovery, right? I need to know more about what are those felt pain points, those things that are really pressuring my prospect, and I can solve that pressure for them. Those are some areas that people don't just blurt out typically. Even if they like you and trust you to a certain extent, it takes a certain skill, it takes a certain understanding of how to guide the conversation to get there, in my experience. What's your advice on that? What are some key, good tools and approaches that people can take to uncover those pains?
So I think what I hear a part of in your conversation or in your question that I want to address is that one of the reasons this is so difficult, there's two reasons it's difficult. Number one is you have to have the business acumen, right? So you have to understand, be able to quickly understand your prospect's business and your prospect's customer in order to execute on this. Now, I can tell you really simply, I spent years in IT services over at Konica Minolta and Xerox. And one thing that it makes this difficult, if you sell into one space, then it's pretty easy master that space, right?
Sure.
But if you're like selling across multiple like you are, right? At Overpass, there's multiple verticals, all sorts of different founders in different spaces. And it's challenging to be able to understand their business and their customer and the needs of their customer quite quickly. So I spend a ton of time as an individual contributor doing that. And what I mean by that is I'm literally Googling, if I'm meeting with a manufacturing client, they sell a manufacturing tool, right? I am Googling everything about that business environment. And I do that really simply by being what are the top challenges in semiconductor manufacturing? What are the business challenges? What are the technical challenges? What are the, right? I'm learning everything about that in giving myself a crash course before I'm meeting with clients. And most salespeople, you're lucky if they go to a website and look at what they do, right?
Right.
So
take a glance at the LinkedIn.
So you gotta have the conviction to understand your client's business. If you don't already know, you need to know before you ever go and speak to them. So number one is that business acumen piece, because otherwise you're not going to be able to execute. I think number two, and I kind of hear this in what you're saying, is the fear factor, right? So this fear that if we start asking hard questions that are invasive, that we are going to offend, that we're going to turn off, that people don't want to tell us. And it's just fundamentally not true.
Nice.
Your prospects are not going to be offended if you ask them the tough questions that are going to help them. Mm-hmm. Do you know what offends them? You asking a bunch of crap questions that are only built to qualify, give you information that tells you if you can sell to them or not, and are a waste of time to them and don't really help them. That's offensive. But me asking you a question like, hey, you come to me for sales training, and I go, Jonathan, what is the demo conversion rate for your sales team today? Mm-hmm. And if you don't want to answer that question for me, I can't help you.
Yeah, right. So if there's a wall there, then move on, right? That's maybe they've done you a favor at that point.
Yeah. You can't play baseball with someone if you throw a ball at them and they just sit there and watch it. You're not playing ball, right? You both got to be playing ball. So one of the things I do to soften this up is I just tell people at the beginning, I'll say, hey, my sales process is probably a lot different than what you're used to experiencing. And that's because most salespeople think their job is to sell you something. And I understand that is actually not my job. So my job today in our conversation is that you walk out knowing the full scope of what's going on in this area of your business, how it's really impacting you. And if you should change, if the cost of change is larger or smaller than doing nothing at all. And that you also walk away understanding that what criteria you should be using and evaluating what you should change to, whether you ever do business with me or not. So you're going to notice that I ask a lot, my questions are really different. Just go along with me, because at the end, you're going to be really grateful that we had this conversation, and you're going to walk away feeling like this was time well spent, no matter if we ever do business. Does that sound fair?
That sounds more than fair.
People are going to be right? People are going to be like, yes, please sign me up. Yeah.
You've settled an unknown, and basically you've sold the conversation, right? You've laid out a reason why it is of value to them to take a few minutes, be disclosive, because they have something to expect in return for that in transactionally. And that's fair. That's how human relationships work. I love that. I love that answer. And that's something anyone can do if they're willing, is just, hey, this is why I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. Lay it out there. Do you think that behind that there's also something in terms of intent? Humans are amazingly intuitive beings, and we can just tell where someone's coming from when it comes to their intent. And if I'm not really putting the welfare of the other person first, or if I am, do you feel like that also comes across and that plays a key role?
Absolutely. And I think we do a disservice if we minimize this piece for the salesperson themselves, because this is really hard. Detaching yourself from the outcome is really hard to do. When the pressure is on, when you have a number to hit, when you need to get another deal, when leadership is on you to close, it's really hard to internally make sure that your mindset does not succumb to that. And that your mindset is my job is not to do that. That is not my job. And and I sometimes when I'm getting on a sales call with a prospect, I'm giving myself affirmation beforehand. And I'm my job is to find out what's going on and help them to know if they should change or not, and why, and what will happen if they don't. And that's my job. I remind myself to put myself in that place. And I got to tell you, Jonathan, it feels so much better on your soul to sell this way. Not only do you win more and clients win more, but it feels so much better on your soul.
Do you feel like that's part of that is because you're being more disclosive? There's an element of almost artifice, almost it's not as honest as it could be in a lot of selling, and this just clears the air. it's utterly honest and it's above board. You feel like, is that part of it, do you think? And if so, what else? Why is it better on the soul? I like that a lot.
I mean, if you ask most people why they went into sales, they will tell you that it's because they want to help people. I mean, when I that's the number one answer I get is they want to help people.
Sure.
And selling this way helps people whether they ever buy from you or not. They walk away better for interacting with you. Like if you're selling in a way where it's like you get on and you ask a few questions and then you're like, can you see my screen? And you're putting on the deck and you're walking through your little demo and showing them the little thing, right? Like your thing, whatever it is you sell, there is no way that it is the right choice right now for most or all of the people. Like that's just not true.
Sure.
And so if you're selling and you're like, I don't really know if they should buy it or not. I don't really know how it's going to impact them or not. I don't really know if it's going to make a difference and fix all their problems. I think it will. My product is pretty awesome, but I don't really know. Like that just really doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel like helping. That feels like self-serving.
Right.
And it feels like stress. That feels like stress and anxiety.
Yeah. I like that. And you want to feel like you can talk to that client later on and they're going to be happy to hear from you. If you see them at the store, right, they'll smile at you. It's a good feeling. I love what you're bringing here, Racheal. So by way of questions, so we have different audience members. I've seen it from more than one. So I'm just going to throw it out there. Are there some questions that you should kind of have in mind? Like, do you have a list that you draw from? What you're talking about isn't something that sounds like it's overly scripted. So we'll say that at the outset. But given that that's the case, still, there probably are some good stock questions that you should kind of have and make sure that you've kind of covered the ground. Would you mind, like, what do you recommend? Or do you kind of have a stock set of questions you use in discovery?
I do not have a stock set of questions because every conversation is different and every client is different. Wouldn't it be nice? I think that's actually where we kind of go wrong is that we, especially enablement people, right? They're like, because reps ask for this, can I have the questions to ask, right? But it's, there is no shortcut. This is about learning how to think and how to think differently. And so it's not about having some sort of template of questions, but here's where I would start if I'm creating my own questions. Instead of making a list of questions, make a list of, first of all, like I said before, and you can actually go to our website. You can download the problem identification chart for free.
Okay.
Like it's there. So I would start there and you don't have to use the chart, it's just an Excel spreadsheet, but I would start with like, what are those technical process problems you solve? What are the business problems that you solve? And when you get to the business problems, I want you to think of them like a disease. Okay. Like, the business problem is diabetes. Okay. So I want you to think of it like a disease. And so what is that disease within your client's organization? Maybe it's like, not hitting their quarterly revenue number or something, right? What are the symptoms that business problem exists? Okay. What are the symptoms of the disease?
Okay.
Is this tracking?
No, I like it. It is tracking. Sure.
Yeah. So what are the symptoms of that, like that those problems exist? What are the problems? What are the symptoms of the problems? And then like the symptoms become like, what do you need to know? Make a list of what do you need to know that this business problem exists. Because you can't ask great questions. Like a lot of times, especially when we first start teaching like gap sellers, they just kind of ask random questions all over the place because they really don't know what they're looking for. So it's about figuring out what are you looking for? So when I go to the doctor and I'm like, hey, I'm having headaches all the time. What does that doctor do? She starts being like, okay, like, where is the headache? What does, how often does it happen in a day? Like, have you changed your eating habits? Blah, blah, blah. She runs a bunch of like blood tests and, she looks in your ears, right? Whatever that kind of like process is. She asks a lot of questions about like the symptoms, right? And then she takes all of that information, all of those tests, and she gives me a diagnosis, and then she gives me a prescription or like what I need to do to fix it. So if you're the doctor and someone is coming to you and they go, you know what, like I'm not hitting like my, fundraising goals, or I'm not hitting my revenue targets, then you need to know like, okay, what's going on? What are the symptoms that this like root cause over here is what's causing it? Mm-hmm. So, it starts with figuring out what do you need to know. And once you figure out what you need to know to diagnose, the questions will come.
Well, I love it. Well, we've had such a fantastic conversation. The time has absolutely flown by, Racheal May. We're going to definitely put some of the details in our show notes. What are some recommendations you would give to our audience by way of maybe books they could read or other resources they may take advantage of to go deeper on this topic?
Well, it's all in this book right here, first of all. So I would definitely start there. And then, of course, we have... you can follow me. I post constantly about, how to execute on this. And you can follow Keenan. He does as well, right? The author of Gap Selling. So we all speak to this all of the time. You can also go to our website, salesgrowthcompany.com. And we have tons of like resources, free things that you can download, tools that you can choose to try and execute. And you can always reach out to me if you have any questions or need some help.
All right. Well, sounds good. Well, folks, check out Racheal May on LinkedIn. Take advantage of those resources there. And take this thing deeper. Discovery. It's such a key to so many good things happening in your sales results and in your organization. Racheal May, thanks so much for joining us for today's live episode.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun.